Aviation in Utah began shortly after the Wright brothers' first historic flight in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in 1903. Only 7 years later, the first Barnstormers were taken to the skies above the Beehive State. In 1926, a young man from Payson, Utah named Art Mortensen was learning to fly. His love of flight and his dedication to aviation would have a long-lasting impact on Ogden and northern Utah.
When my father was a very young man, he lived in Payson, Utah, and he would look up in the sky and watch occasionally when a plane would go over. And he would just stop and just daydream, and he said that's all he could think about.
In the early days, Ogden's airport was just a small field in South Ogden. Young Art Mortensen would hang around the airport constantly and help pilots clean and repair their aircraft in exchange for the chance to get some time aloft. He learned a great deal from these pilots, and soon they trusted him with taking off and landing their airplanes.
Well, he would bum a ride in the planes and just go up with them just as a passenger to learn how to get the thrill of flying.
The 1930s were the heyday of flying in Utah for Art. He began barnstorming and performing with a flying circus to help pay for gasoline and spare parts for his airplanes.
I think the barnstorming name came from somebody earlier than he, where they'd actually open both ends of the barn, and to entertain the crowd, they'd fly through the barn and they'd all go out and do acrobatics and scare everybody, and then they'd take, we'd call them dollar rides. They'd give everybody a ride, and it was a way for the general public to learn something about aviation.
Over the next several years, Art Mortensen would earn his transport license and mechanics and ground school licenses. He became a qualified instructor and trained over 2,000 pilots during his long career. In 1934, Art and his new bride, Sarah, bought a small flying service called Utah Pacific Airways. This was during the Great Depression, and Art was the only active pilot with an airplane in Ogden.
Utah Pacific Airways was a charter business that my father ran, and he flew people all over the Intermountain West or the country, wherever they wanted to go.
By the early 1940s, it became apparent to Ogden officials that a new, larger airport was needed. Art was asked to move his flying operations to the new Robert H. Hinckley Airport. He was given the job of airport manager for a token salary of $1 per month. He remained as manager of Ogden's new airport for the rest of his long career. With World War II in full swing, the U.S. Navy recruited Art to run the civilian pilot training program at the new Ogden Airport in 1943. Working with Weber College, Art Mortensen helped train over 500 pilots in a 15-month span. Many of these young men went on to advanced training in California and served as fighter pilots in the Pacific Theater.
He used to tell us that he felt good about it because he didn't lose one student. They all passed, and they all went on to become fighter pilots and bombers and served in the South Pacific.
He was an aviator's aviator. He really saw a great change from fabric and wood spars, wood frames, to metal and speed and a lot of knowledge. There was a lot, at World War II, we gained a lot of knowledge about airplanes. He lived through a great growth area, so you might say, from the buggy to the, speeding car.
Art Mortensen was a true pioneer of aviation in Utah. He played a pivotal role in the development of civil aviation in Ogden, helped train hundreds of naval aviators in World War II, ran a successful Piper aircraft dealership, and led the growth of Ogden's airport from its infancy to the modern era.
He was a unique person in a unique time, and he made the best of it for aviation. He was basically my hero, and he was always a friend, and I always looked up to him and always respected him.